Welcome to TBN's Joy in Our Town program. We're excited that you're here today. I'm your host, Dr. Jason Jackson, the chairman of the Jackson Global Initiative Organizations. And today's segment, we're going to be addressing something that's crucially important to our community, and that's the issue of homelessness. And I've got a great panel of people that are here with us today, very excited. We've got Mr. Perry Cannon from Hope, South Florida. Then we have Mr. John Kirscher and Ms. Mercedes Ayala, and from Luke 14 Homeless Outreach. And again, we're so excited to have you guys.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. And so one of the things, I had the great pleasure of speaking with Mr. Perry Cannon earlier, and in addition to the business initiatives that we have, I run an investment bank, but I'm also a pastor. I'm a pastor, and we have a food bank. And we do a couple things in the community, and we had this great conversation about the faith-based community getting outside of the walls and impacting those that need it the most. So very, very excited about this program. And first thing, if you can, Perry, would you tell us a little bit about your ministry?
Well, Hope, South Florida, which was originally known as the Shepherd's Way, started about 20 years ago. Our founder, Dr. Fred Scarborough, was hosting a meal at the church for homeless individuals. And the bus pulled up, and off the bus came a couple of families. And he was very moved by the fact that there were families living on the streets of Fort Lauderdale. So one thing led to another. He engaged in conversation with them, and before long, he was putting them into hotels, and he was feeling a tug on his heart for something more. And not shortly after that, he got together with his church pastor and said, I want to do more for homeless people. And so the ministry has just grown exponentially since that time. Now we are caring for not only families and children that are homeless, but for veterans, for individuals through our shared meals. And so the ministry, after 20 years, is really looking at the larger scale of homelessness and how faith-based community can be an impact to those we serve.
Yeah, that's interesting. And one of the points that you made is it could be astonishing for people that don't know. One of our businesses in downtown Fort Lauderdale on Las Olas Boulevard. And Fort Lauderdale is the yachting capital of the world. I mean, it is the yachting capital, not of the United States, but of the world. This is where people come. And how could it be so that there's such enormous wealth here, but yet right on the outskirts of one of the most pronounced areas in the country, we have such deep homelessness. And I'm also a veteran, so there's a lot of them that are veterans that are out there, and these are issues that need to be addressed in the community and that are being addressed, and we are so thankful for all the nonprofits, not just Christian nonprofits that are serving those in the community, but all nonprofits that are caring for our countrymen. One of the biggest terms that I use when we're out doing the things that we do is that these are our countrymen. They're not black, they're not white, they're not illegal immigrants. These are people that are residing in America with us, and as long as they are here, and we have an obligation, particularly as the body of Christ, to support them. But giving food is one thing. Lots of nonprofits can do that. But what we also should be giving is the love of Christ, the compassion of Christ, and the opportunity. And that's where you guys come in. Ms. Marcella, tell us a little bit about your ministry that you guys have, Luke 14. What do you guys do, John?
Oh, we started actually on a call to find them and feed them. That was the call back in November 2014. And we decided, let's just go out there and feed some of the people that we come across at the beach. But when we went to the beach, there was nobody there. Not knowing where to go with all the food, we just went for a drive, and somehow really I felt we were divinely guided to go to Stranahan Park. I didn't know it existed.
Right.
And so we went there and saw about 150 people at least in the streets, on the floor, sitting down. My jaw just dropped. I couldn't believe it. And so my husband and I decided afterwards, well, we should come back one day again. Well, that's not the plan God had.
Right.
He had something else planned. And when we shared it with our church, everybody there was just so open to want to come out and volunteer and help and give in whatever way that they can, that before you knew it, God created a ministry that we didn't even know.
Wow.
Yes.
That's how he does it, huh? And now, how do you guys partner with Perry over there at South Florida?
Well, Perry, I call him Father Teresa.
Father Teresa.
Father
Wow,
Teresa, we
marvelous.
love Perry. Perry, at the time there was an ordinance taking place in Fort Lauderdale, and so he said, you won't be able to do this in Stranahan Park anymore. Let us help you. We can find a hosting church for you. We can help you. And so our church, John and Pastor Chris and Michael and Perry and Pastor Rich from Christ Community Church, they got together, and by the grace of God, Christ Community Church said, we will host you. And they allow us to go there, and we do our outreach there. And so it's a partnership.
Right.
Two churches and a Christian organization that came together to really meet a need in the streets.
And I think that's one of the issues to highlight is that you're not necessarily, your intention was to get out into the community, but because of the ordinance changes, you weren't trying to reel people into the church per se, you were trying to serve the needs of people, but because of some of the ordinance changes in Fort Lauderdale particularly, we're unable to distribute. So what you guys have done is you've established a community of churches as what we would call points of distribution throughout the area where people can come.
Right.
And so that's a beautiful thing. John, how would you describe, statistically, homelessness? How would you describe homelessness in South Florida?
Well, there's a lot of homeless people out there, and the families, I think, are particularly interesting to me, and I know Perry mentioned that earlier. When you see a mom with a couple of kids living on the streets, it really breaks our heart. And what we really want to do is give them hope. And we talk about food and clothing. We meet the physical needs.
Right.
We'll meet their emotional needs by just having somebody who can listen to them,
Right.
and maybe pray with them and just sit down for 10 or 15 minutes and say, hey, tell me what's going on in your life. And that strengthens them emotionally, but most importantly, we want to meet the spiritual need.
Right.
Because
Yes.
I hear stories every week. I got my phone stolen. They stole my backpack. They stole this. They stole that. And these people are living in a very, very difficult circumstance. But what I try to remind them every time I get in front of them and talk with people is you can't take Jesus from you. So if we can give them the hope of Christ, that can give them the strength to get through this turmoil that they're in right now. And so our primary mission is to share the gospel with them. And we do that through food, through clothing, through prayer, and try and build them up in that way.
Yeah, and I think, as you said, families. There's a lot of families that have more month at the end of their money.
Right.
And it's not that they're not working. Many are at that threshold where they make just enough to not qualify for anything and government subsidies. And now they're in a position where they're forced to choose between working two jobs or just completely not working at all. And so in addition to homelessness, there is this great need for families to be served. And our food bank, the Tree of Life Food Bank, that's one of the areas that we focus on are those families, those working class families that just have more month at the end of their money. And so I think that there has to be long-term. Now, Perry, there's some ideas that you have, and give us some ideas about, in addition to feeding, what other things can we do to service those that are currently homeless?
Well, I think the food is merely the opening of the door. You invite them in, and they sit at a table. There's restrooms, there's air conditioning, there's loving community surrounding them. And then you get to know them. That's, as John refers to, the relationship, know their name. And then trust comes into it. And then conversations take place where, well, what are the obstacles that's keeping maybe this person from moving to the next step into their journey? Is it they need an ID? Is it they've lost their birth certificate? Do they need employment? Maybe they can be reunited with a loved one that's out of state. So by establishing the relationships, which started with a meal, you're able to then better understand what can you do for that person spiritually, physically, emotionally, to move them beyond, to move them to a better place in their life. So
Yeah, that's
we're
wonderful.
doing
And
that.
I just think that, and I agree with you 100%, that we've got to, prayer is important, and I believe that God still is touching people in supernatural ways. That's great. But if he does, suppose that God heals someone or restores a family, if I don't help them get jobs, if I don't help them get substance, something tangible, and I think that from what I hear you saying is you're saying that the food is a gate to begin to provide other resources. And currently you're using the church systems of churches to do that. What would you say? Would you say that we need more unity between churches to accomplish this monumental task?
I would say I'd want every church in Broward County unified in some cause, whether it's orphans, whether it's widows, whether it's homelessness. But I think there is no greater testimony to the power of the Bible and the power of the Word than for churches to come together and to work as one. We certainly couldn't host our meals if it was just one church. And I think the homeless see that. They see the greater number of people. But in Broward County, I know there's a lot of churches that can still step up and be a part of this. I'd love to see the meals go to 7 days a week. We're currently 5 to 6. I'd like to see it a couple times during the day. And I'd like to see more people getting out of the pews. Just getting out of those pews and being part of the solution.
Right. So you suppose that there's a lot of manpower and resources
Absolutely.
that are in the pews. Why do you think it is that they're not engaging?
Maybe it's lack of awareness. Maybe it's the leadership. I wish I could answer that question, but I think overall maybe it's just the lack of awareness, that because the issues of homelessness, even though they spread throughout Broward County, there's really a concentration in the downtown corridor. So those churches or people driving, if you go by Stranahan Park, it's just laden with homelessness right now. So I think it's up to the leadership. I think there needs to be champions that come out of the pews, like Mercedes here with Calvary. She saw a need. She wanted to do something. She then went to her church and she got her church engaged. And we need more champions from churches to step out.
Yeah, and that's great. And sometimes you don't need the title or the position to change
right.
something. David was not even in the army.
I know.
And he was the one. He didn't have a uniform,
right.
and he was the one that defeated them. So Jesus, he speaks about ambassadors. He speaks about disciples. He speaks about all of those things, but I never find Jesus speaking about congregation. So we're charging those that are watching. Yes, it's the leader's job to create opportunities for you to function, but until then, get plugged in with something that can help impact your environment, right. And you don't have to wait for the leader to make that change. Maybe like John and Marcella, you can jump out and influence your leader. So that is really great stuff. I mean, it's something very, very big in our community. I want to thank you that you guys have come. I appreciate the work that you're doing. I want to thank our viewers.